Another Dendrobium repotting video today, but this time using a few different supplies that you may not have seen me use in the past. Let's get after it, coming up at the Orchid Hut. Welcome back to the Orchid Hut. My name is Dana and we will be repotting this Dendrobium in this video today. The name of it is, and I believe you've probably seen this orchid before somewhere along the way, Dendrobium Sodka Blue. Now I'll give you a little bit of a story about this one because it does fall into the category of my sort of neglected orchids. It actually grew for most of the last growing season inside the Orchid Hut rather than outside. You know, I was trying to protect it from all of the maladies of the last growing season, and I put it inside the Orchid Hut to protect it. But what ended up happening was that the canes grew with a sort of bent shape. Instead of nice and tall and straight, they're kind of leaning over. And I have a feeling that's probably because they were reaching for the light as they were growing. So this orchid now not only needs to be repotted in the worst way. This is still in the grower's pot from a while back when I purchased this one. And as we repot this, I would like to be able to attempt to straighten the canes, make sure it is very secure in the pot so that it can establish itself in a better way this growing season. Now, one of the other things, and you know, you always have to sort of notice the growth pattern on your particular orchids, but this is the cane that grew last year, this one right here that's sort of bent over. And the cane is fully developed and mature before the roots start forming on this particular orchid. So you can see this new growth was trying to sit down roots inside some very old media on top of probably some very dead roots. And of course that's not ideal. So what I'm hoping rather quickly here is that I will see some new growth at the bottom of last year's canes. And once those have matured, then they will be able to develop roots in some better media for the future. All right, so a couple of things about this repot that are going to be different. I am going to be using some stakes, and we'll talk in detail about those a little bit more later to sort of straighten this one and secure it. I'm going to be putting it in this clay pot which has a lot of large holes for aeration, but because it's going to take some sturdiness for these particular stakes to work, I have put some, it's almost like some floral crunchy foam in the bottom of this pot. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as I'm repotting this. I'm also going to be using some of my favorite soft tie, and I'll give you the details on that as we move along in the video. Okay, so let me get set up for repotting with some paper towels, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I really do think the first part of this is to just see how bad off this is inside the pot. Extremely root bound, but I have a feeling by now that most of those roots are probably succumbed. And I watered this morning, so it might be a little bit more swollen and sort of difficult to see what's going on, but yeah, okay, so very decomposed media. And you can even see, I think that's probably like some mold spores that are there. And if not that, then it's probably a critter that has laid its eggs inside the old media. But as I'm feeling these roots, you know, they look white, but the majority of them, I believe, are of no substance. Yeah, they're just very not exactly mushy, but of no substance whatsoever. So most of those kinds of roots are going to be cut away, and we'll be getting as much of this orchid cleaned up as possible. Just going to kind of start on one side and just start getting rid of them because they're no longer supporting the plant. And I think there are very few functioning roots on this plant. I'm actually a little bit, now that I'm seeing this, I'm surprised that it was able to keep itself as hydrated as it did. All of this at the bottom is dead. So, you know, it's just a matter of kind of just working at it here. So, let me tell some other stories in my orchid world. You know, I thought I was really, really close to being able to put my orchids that were overwintering indoors back outside, and I actually put 4 orchids outside about a week ago, kind of getting the space outside cleaned up and whatnot. And lo and behold, if we don't have a forecast for next week, with temperatures in the low 40s. So it is hopefully probably the final cold front of the early spring season. So I'll be having to take those 4 orchids and at the very least putting them in the garage for a couple of nights. And then maybe after that I can actually see about moving all of my orchids that have been indoors for the winter back outside. We have had horrible, horrible, horrible spring cleanup in our yard, front and back. The canopy of oak trees, and these oak trees now are probably about 40 years old. The canopy of oak trees just drops a tremendous amount of leaves in the spring. And you would think, spring? Wait a second, I thought trees were supposed to lose their leaves in the fall. Well, not these trees because they're, I guess, semi-deciduous. And so they lose a few leaves in the fall, but then the worst of it is all of the leaves that drop in the spring before the blooms, which causes another mess, and the new leaves grow on the trees. So it has been weeks and weeks and weeks of dropping leaves, and now the leaves have sort of slowed down, but now we have all of the bloom drop, which makes its own kind of mess. So, you know, it's just perpetual raking, and the city that I live in, you know, picks up the green waste, and right now I think we have 22 bags of leaves for like about the 3rd time sitting at the curb, waiting for the city to pick them up. They just can't keep up this time of year because people have just way too much green waste. So that has been a lot of work at the onset of spring. And then I enjoy bird watching. That's one of the things I enjoy, and so the spring is oftentimes when you can see a lot of different migratory birds through the Gulf Coast region. And so I have been spending some time taking some short little birding trips. It's been very enjoyable. And I decided to take a little online class, so that's been taking up some of my time. And you know, orchids have kind of just been hanging out here towards the end of winter, beginning of spring. I'm trying to do my best to get them all set up for success before I put them back outside, like this one. And, you know, other than that, time just flies. I do have one orchid to film for you that's a first-time bloomer, so I'll be doing that here shortly. And You know, at the beginning of the year too, I hadn't realized it. Maybe it's a sign of getting older as well, but I have like all my doctor's appointments at the beginning of the new year. And so it seems like since January I've had, you know, 3 doctor's appointments, just checkup kinds of things, but 3 doctor's appointments every month. And then for each of those, there's usually a little bit of an insurance battle that you have to be prepared to fight. Okay, so it is not imperative that every single little dead root is removed here. As long as we get the bulk of it and get out any old, you know, media, I think we will be fine. And this orchid is going to have to work really, really hard to put on a new root system when it develops some new growth, and hopefully it can do that now that it will have fresh media. But you can see right here that this new growth attempted to do that, but those roots right here, the couple that are still alive, didn't really have a great place to go. So we're going to trim off a little bit more right here. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'm going to go to the sink and rinse this. It will get some of the final little pieces of bark out. And then I will be back to explain how I have set up the pot for the new growing environment. Okay, give me a few seconds. I'll be right back from the sink. Okay, so back from the sink. After this orchid was rinsed, I let the root system dry a bit, and then I did spray it with 3% hydrogen peroxide. Number 1, because it was the first time coming out of the grower's pot, and number 2, because I saw what looked like mold spores when I was pulling away the old media. So this one has been sprayed with 3% hydrogen peroxide. I don't always do that, but I did it in this case. Now let's talk about the pot for just a second. Inside the pot, I have wedged a piece of floral, I call it sponge, but it's really not exactly sponge. It's a bit more crunchy than that. And it's used for floral arrangements to hold the stems. Now, if you can see up close, and maybe the camera can focus on it, it's almost constructed like a microscopic honeycomb. So there are little air pockets in between the green foam. And I kind of tested this under the sink for a few days, just getting the edge of this wet. And it does hold moisture in those little air pockets of the microscopic honeycomb, but it does not get soggy or mushy or anything like that, because it's meant to be used in floral arrangements. So when I put it in this pot, I thought to myself, okay, how is that going to change how the inside of this pot works? And while I think that there will be a little bit of extra water retention in the bottom of this pot because of those air pockets in this sponge, I think it will still dry out rather quickly because of the large air holes in this clay pot. And then you might think, well, is this going to break down over time? And the answer to that is yes, probably it will. But, you know, the pieces can probably wash out the bottom of the pot, and I'm probably going to have to, you know, repot this in a couple of years, 2-3 years anyway, because the media will be, you know, deteriorated. And so, you know, by that time I'll have to redo this entire setup anyway. So I'm hoping that this floral sponge, and you can see what I did here is I just cut out a round piece that somewhat fit in the bottom of the clay pot from this larger piece. And actually this is called, and there's you know, a whole bunch of different brands, but it's actually called floral styrofoam. But if you just go to any craft center, fabric center, you can find that for floral arrangements. Okay, so it's just kind of wedged in there. Now the idea is that that floral styrofoam can hold the stakes a little bit more securely than if I just put the stakes into nothing but media. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of see what's going to happen here. So we want to position this about like that so that the new growth is at the rim of the pot. So because I had to cut off all of that dead root system, I'm going to have to put some media in this pot before placing the orchid. This is just what I usually use for dendrobiums. It's the Repot Dendrobium mix. And yes, some of the pieces are going to come out of the holes until, that kind of settles down and the holes kind of plug up a little bit, and then it'll stop coming out the holes. Okay. And, I don't have to have this necessarily potted high. I can pot this a bit lower if I want to save a little bit on not having to use quite so much media, which I think I might do. Okay. All right, so that looks good. It's not as high, it's not potted as high as it could be, but okay. All right, so this is kind of step one of the repot. And I am going to press down just a little bit to kind of secure what's left of that root system in that new media. And will it stand by itself? Not exactly. So let's go ahead and do the first stake while I'm holding this here. And of course I'm, working in an utter mess, but let's go ahead and kind of talk through this. I have some stakes that have been used before, but they are wire and they are plastic coated. If you're going to reuse your stakes, I recommend that you use the ones that are sort of coated in plastic, because then there's really not any bacteria sort of harboring in any wood that might be damp. So I think what I'm going to do here, this particular cane grew kind of straight, but this next one is the one that is rather bent. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this right here. Get it on the other side of this. And I know this plant is tall and it may be a little bit difficult to kind of, did you hear it go through the styrofoam? There we go. That is one very sturdy stake. Okay, now I'm going to take some of my soft tie. This is sort of plastic coated wire. For outdoor staking, I prefer to use this. It holds up a little bit better than like the plastic butterfly clips. So, because I kind of want to try to straighten this a little bit, I'm going to put it up high. And I'm realizing this may be off camera, so I will show you when I'm finished. It's taking everything I have of two hands to kind of hold this in place and twist it at the same time. I hear a cardinal singing right outside the kitchen window. Okay, there we go. That's pretty good. All right, now let me show you what I did. So you can see the plastic soft tie around the stake, and it's holding that in place really, really well. Now I can sort of like step away and I don't have to use my hands to hold this in place. Now it does need a little bit more work. So let me kind of clean up the mess that I made, and I'll be back and we will finish staking this orchid. Okay, be right back. Okay, so now that this plant is a bit more stable, let's go ahead and finish the staking with the two other stakes that I had planned to use. And once again, this cane in the middle is sort of straight on its own. It's not a cane that grew last year. So I'm going to come over here to this particular cane that's leaning, and I'm going to add a stake there, hopefully straightening up the entire plant a bit more. And again, you can hear the stake going through. Let me see if I can reposition the leaves a little bit here. This way or that way, left or right. And get another piece of the soft tie. I think I will put it in between these two leaves right here. This takes more coordination than you realize until you actually do it. Okay, so that looks pretty good for that one. And there is one more cane back here that is sort of really wiggly now that that old root system has been cut away. So let me go ahead and stake that one. This actually might be on camera now. You can see me wrapping the soft tie around the cane and the stake. Okay, I would say that this plant is now really secure in this new pot. I did go out and get some extra media because I think adding a little bit to the top here might be a good idea. This will settle, and until it sorts itself out, some of the media will be falling out of the holes. Okay, so I do believe we are finished with this repot. Let me add the tag back. And I will hold this off the end of the counter so that you can maybe see the entire plant a bit better. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget the notifications bell to let you know when I've posted something new. And the subscribe button is coming up in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. So thank you all so much for watching. And if you stay tuned for just another few seconds, I will show you what's going on in the bay window growing area for my orchids. Talk to you all next time.